Now in our 26th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1380 with a release and air date of Saturday, August 9th, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1380 of This Week in Amateur Radio. AST SpaceMobile defends its use of the amateur bands for satellite tracking and control, claiming no interference. The ARRL launches the new ARRL DXCC Trident Award, which honors 100 confirmed contacts on 3 modes. The ARRL is hiring, and has released a new jobs list for amateurs. Hams over IP invite amateurs formerly with Ham Shack Hotline to apply for service on its network. The crew aboard the International Space Station begins its work routine. A high-altitude balloon camp is recruiting amateurs to assist in tracking operations. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration decommissions 2 satellites. The registration for the International Amateur Radio Union Region 2 General Assembly is now open. AMSAT files its objection to the AST SpaceMobile's proposed use of the 70cm band. The ARRL introduces its new virtual amateur radio history and research museum called Radio Alpha. And, get ready to challenge your cipher decoding skills during the upcoming Enigma Machine special event. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio, is having a quiet weekend, and answers the question, what can we activate today? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to October of 1922 when the second round of cross-Atlantic tests were being made. This time though, it was European stations' turn to participate. We will hear about it as Will presents part 2 of Crossings, The Reply. We will stop by and visit with Bill Salyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our Albany, New York headquarters studio, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where parents are excited and children are nervous at the thought of school resuming, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And from our studios in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where it's sunny and we've had a really nice stretch of nice low humidity and cool temperatures, but boy, the heat is coming this week. I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from Dallas, Texas, where we finally just had our first 100-degree day of the summer, I'm Tammy, KI5ODE.
And reporting from our news bureau in Hilton, New York, where we're enjoying a few days of much cooler temperatures, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray, Juliet.
And reporting from our True New York News Bureau, where the purple loosestrife is everywhere, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains, where it's the height of the season for home gardens and predatory garden critters, like that raccoon who keeps pilfering our sweet corn. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where oven-like conditions continue, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, staying indoors.
Leading off our news this week, Facing thousands of complaints, AST Space Mobile is pushing back against concerns that the company's giant satellites risk interfering with amateur radio operations across the globe. On Tuesday, the company sent a letter to the U.S. Federal Communications Commission defending its plan to use the 430 to 440 MHz radio bands outside the United States to track and control its proposed fleet of 248 satellites. Those bands have long been allocated to amateur radio operations, including for emergency communications, so the community has been campaigning to stop AST from gaining access. It flooded the FCC's online system with over 2,500 comments, many of them protesting AST's plan to use the spectrum. AST Space Mobile finally responded by telling the FCC that it has designed its satellites to mitigate interference with the amateur radio bands. In addition, the company says it's proposing very limited, non-routine use of the 430 to 440 MHz band, and only for launch and early orbit phases for its satellites, or emergency operations when other frequency bands are unavailable. AST also says it can shut down radio band use if interference is detected. In addition, the company has submitted an analysis from a third-party company, RKF Engineering Solutions, which found the risk of interference to amateur radio operators to be extremely unlikely. Modeling shows that even under worst-case conditions, the probability of interference with the amateur satellite service is extremely small, less than 0.1% per pass, and only a handful of events were observed in a 30-day simulation, the analyst says. AST is urging the FCC to greenlight its plan to launch and operate commercial services over its 248 satellite constellation, which is designed to beam connectivity to everyday smartphones. The resulting system will compete with SpaceX cellular Starlink service, which is already available through T-Mobile. However, the amateur radio community has been calling on the FCC to deny AST's push to use the 430 to 440 MHz bands. On Tuesday, the American Radio Relay League sent its own letter to the Commission, highlighting the stiff opposition across the amateur radio community to the spectrum use. At least 17 national radio amateur societies from around the world took the extraordinary step of making their opposition known to the Commission, the letter says. Some of the amateur radio groups also claim to have detected interference in Europe from AST's fleet of existing satellites. The first 5 Bluebirds and the Blue Walker 3, unlike many commercial services, amateur radio is often the only communication system still operational during national disasters and emergencies. The Bulgarian Federation of Radio Amateurs told the FCC. In its letter to the FCC, AST said, despite contrary claims from some amateur radio commenters, AST Space Mobile is not transmitting in the 430 to 440 MHz band on its Bluebird 1 or Blue Walker 3. Still, one amateur radio group has detected evidence that AST merely shut down the radio communications from the Blue Walker 3 satellite 2 weeks ago.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The public comment period has officially closed for FCC Space Bureau Docket 25-201, which reviewed a request by AST and Science LLC, or AST Space Mobile, to use the 430 through 440 MHz band for telemetry, tracking, and command operations. This spectrum includes 435 through 438 MHz, a critical allocation for the amateur satellite service. The filing window ended at midnight Eastern Time on July 21st. AMSAT submitted formal comments opposing the proposal, citing the extensive non-commercial use of 435 through 438 megahertz by amateur satellites, including Oscar-class spacecraft, educational CubeSats, and the Eris station aboard the International Space Station. AMSAT also highlighted ongoing interference caused by AST's Blue Walker 3 satellite on 437.500 megahertz, which has disrupted InspireSat-1. The filing urges the Commission to deny AST's request and preserve the integrity of the amateur satellite service. The international amateur satellite community also responded forcefully. AMSAT DL in Germany provided direct evidence of Blue Walker 3 interference received at the Bochum Observatory. AMSAT SM in Sweden filed in opposition as well, and the International Amateur Radio Union pointed out that AST's use of 430 through 440 megahertz under International Telecommunications Union Radio Regulation Article 4.4 lacks required sharing studies and would pose significant interference risks to amateur operations worldwide. As of the close of the comment period, the FCC docket recorded 2,283 total filings, a remarkable outpouring of concern from the amateur community. While not all filings were express comments in opposition, the overwhelming majority appear to be from individual amateur radio operators urging the FCC to reject AST's request. The ARRL encouraged its members to participate. The result is one of the most heavily commented amateur spectrum proceedings in recent FCC history. AST has maintained that its use of the band would be limited to early orbit phases and emergencies, but commenters, including AMSAT, argue that such limited use does not mitigate the real potential for interference. AMSAT emphasized that many amateur satellites rely on the International Amateur Radio Union coordinated use of 435 through 438 megahertz, and that commercial systems should operate in bands explicitly allocated for space operations, not shared amateur satellite spectrum. The FCC's reply comment window remains open through August 5, 2025. During this period, individuals and organizations may respond directly to previously filed comments, clarify technical concerns, and reinforce the case for preserving amateur access to 435 through 438 megahertz. AMSAT encourages reply commenters to cite interference data, highlight educational and non-commercial uses, and support the formal filings made by AMSAT and IARU. After the reply deadline, the FCC Space Bureau will review the entire docket record. This process may take weeks or months and may culminate in a proposed order or public notice. While there is no petition to deny window in this particular docket, stakeholders may still file additional comments or seek reconsideration if the Commission issues a preliminary decision. AMSAT will continue to monitor the proceedings and work in coordination with the IARU and international partners to protect amateur satellite spectrum. The 435 through 438 megahertz allocation remains a cornerstone of AMSAT's mission to promote education, experimentation, and global collaboration in space communications. AMSAT thanks all who filed comments and urges continued engagement as the proceeding advances.
Several international amateur radio union societies and more than 2,000 individuals have filed their concerns with the United States Federal Communications Commission over a request by a U.S. broadband communications company to use frequencies between 430 and 440 megahertz for a planned constellation of 240 commercial satellites. AST Space Mobile was recently approved for the use of the amateur radio band on an experimental basis for a low Earth orbit satellite known as FM1, which is the prototype for the company's planned mobile phone connectivity from space. The FCC has assigned the call sign WP2XRX, which expires July 1st, 2027. The Texas-based company, a rival of SpaceX, is developing its network in association with AT&T and Verizon. SpaceX is partnering with T-Mobile. The Radio Society of Great Britain, referring on its website to its own filing to the FCC, said that the company's proposal for its constellation has stirred an unprecedented response from the amateur radio community.
The ARRL announces the DXCC Trident Plaque, a new program to honor the accomplishments of radio amateurs who have confirmed QSOs with at least 100 ARRL DXCC award entities on each of three modes: phone, CW, and digital. With more details on the new award, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report.
The basic award is issued upon application and confirmation by the ARRL Awards Department, and it is endorsable at levels of 200, 300, and honor roll, based on achieving that level on all three modes at the time of application. The earliest QSO date and starting date for the DXCC Trident Award is November 1st, 1976, when RTTY, now named Digital, joining all digital QSOs, DXCC was introduced. ARRL Radio Sport and Regulatory Affairs Manager Bart Janke, W9JJ, says the new award should be exciting to hams. It gives all participants of the DXCC, especially those who are new to DXCC, something fresh to work towards, he said. ARRL has long had the Worked All States Triple Play Award, but this introduces the multi-mode achievement to the DXCC program. Confirmation of QSOs towards the Trident plaque is done only through the standard process by credits within the ARRL DXCC program via Logbook of the World. No QSO cards will be accepted with a plaque application. If your DXCC credits are not already visible in the Logbook of the World, you must first link your DXCC and Logbook of the World profiles by requesting a credit merge from the ARRL Awards desk. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Celebrate your achievement and dedication to the DXCC program across all modes with the ARRL DXCC Trident Award, a symbol of excellence in amateur radio operating and DXing.
Looking for a new job? Well, the ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, is seeking qualified applicants for several positions at their headquarters in Newington, Connecticut. The American Radio Relay League is a great place for a ham to work. First up is a membership manager. The American Radio Relay League is seeking a dynamic and experienced membership manager to lead strategies focused on membership growth, engagement, and retention. The full-time position is based at league headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, and requires a strong background in marketing and management, along with a solid understanding of membership operations and database systems. The ideal candidate will hold a valid amateur radio license and have a proven track record in developing multi-channel campaigns, analyzing member trends, and cultivating stakeholder relationships. Next up is W1AW operator, an amateur radio on-air opportunity. The league is seeking a licensed amateur radio operator with on-air experience to join their team at W1AW operator in Newington, Connecticut. This on-site role involves operating the W1AW flagship station in accordance with FCC regulations, preparing bulletins, supporting visiting operations, and conducting public tours. Candidates must hold at least an advanced class amateur radio license and must have a minimum of 3 years on-air experience. Strong technical knowledge, professionalism, and the ability to work independently during second shift hours, that's 4 p.m. to 12 midnight, are essential. And last but not least, a technical editor. ARRL is also seeking a skilled and detail-oriented technical editor to contribute to the quality and accuracy of technical content across its flagship publication, QST, and other ARRL materials. This full-time position, also based in Newington, Connecticut, requires an amateur radio extra class license. Responsibilities include reviewing and editing articles, writing technical features, managing editorial timelines, and collaborating with contributors within the amateur radio community. A background in technical writing or engineering and strong copy editing skills are essential. All these positions are 100% on-site, and unfortunately there are no remote options. To view the full job descriptions and apply, visit online at League Headquarters website, arrl.org.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
There's a new resource from ARRL documenting the history of ham radio. With more information on this valuable new amateur radio resource, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this special report.
Radio Alpha is the ARRL Museum and Research Library. It is available for viewing at www.arrl.org/museum. Radio Alpha is envisioned as a Wikipedia-like project administered by a trusted group of volunteers. It aims to serve as a definitive repository of information, offering detailed descriptions and contextual data on pivotal figures, influential organizations, pioneering companies, transformative inventions, and iconic equipment that have shaped the landscape of amateur radio. Radio Alpha addresses the critical need for a centralized, reliable, and easily navigable archive of amateur radio's past. Recognizing the fragmented nature of existing historical data, this database will consolidate diverse information sources into a single, cohesive platform. Users will find meticulously researched entries, cross-referenced to provide a holistic understanding of the connections and evolutions within the hobby. A core principle of Radio Alpha is universal accessibility. Therefore, the database will be entirely free to access, ensuring that researchers, historians, enthusiasts, and the public can explore its content without barriers. Noted author, industrialist, archaeologist, and historian Chuck Penson, WA7ZZE, is the principal volunteer who crafted the collection. Penson has published several books about the history of Heathkit and the Titan II missile. For him, it's a labor of love and necessity. Somebody has to do this, said Penson. Lots of people are doing it independently on their own. Here's a website about the equipment I own, and here's some documents I scanned, and there's a lot of that. The lack of a central location to compile these collections is the root of Radio Alpha. Penson hopes the research library will preserve the data long after individual contributors have passed away. And he hopes that data will be preserved forever. ARRL has an organizational structure that allows it to take a long view of stuff like this. It is best equipped to handle a project like Radio Alpha. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The platform is committed to being free of advertising, spam, and clickbait, prioritizing the integrity of its historical content and providing an uncluttered user experience. This database will be a living resource, regularly updated and expanded through ongoing research and community contributions, fostering a deeper appreciation and understanding of amateur radio's profound impact on communication, technology, and society, wrote Penson. Radio Alpha seeks contributors and volunteers to help develop the content. Hams who have a passion for the history of radio, experience in writing, or extensive knowledge about a particular brand or mode of amateur radio are encouraged to volunteer. The museum also seeks materials which may help grow the collection. Those interested may reach out to Penson at radioalpha@arrl.org. Radio Alpha, the ARRL Museum and Research Library, may be enjoyed at www.arrl.org/radioalpha or www.arrl.org/museum.
According to DX India and the Swedish Society of Radio Amateurs, hams who have made contact with radio operators in India or Sweden, or who have perhaps just heard them on the air, have been hearing these operators identify themselves with call signs that, until this year, did not exist. In India, newly licensed amateur stations have been assigned new suffixes since the 25th of June. Although the existing older call sign forms have not changed, new general grade licenses, which are assigned a VU2 prefix, now get a combination of numbers and letters, creating call signs such as VU22DX or VU29AR. Likewise, restricted grade licenses, which are assigned a VU3 prefix, are receiving suffixes of 2 numbers and 3 letters, creating call signs such as VU33ABS. Jose Jacob, VU2JOS, the Assistant Director of the National Institute of Amateur Radio, said that the changes are a direct result of ham radio's growth in India. He wrote in an email, "These new prefixes are a practical measure to accommodate the increasing number of amateur radio enthusiasts in India by expanding the available consign combinations while still adhering to the country's internationally allocated prefix block. Meanwhile, in Sweden, amateurs who have received the new entry-level class certificate are identifying themselves with the country's new call sign prefix SH. These amateurs can be heard on 40, 20, 15, 10, 6, and 2 meters, where they are permitted to use a maximum of 25 watts of power.
It is the beginning of a new month, and that means it is time for this month's Volunteer Monitoring Report. The Volunteer Monitor, or VM program, is a joint initiative between ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the most current activity report of the VM program. Technician operators in Arizona and New Mexico received advisories concerning 15-meter FT8 operation. Technicians are authorized to operate only CW on that band. An advisory was issued to a technician class operator in Kansas concerning FT8 operation on 40 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on that band. A technician class operator in Nebraska was issued an advisory for operating on 20-meter FT8, a band on which technicians have no privileges. Advisory notices concerning improper wide signals were issued to stations in Washington, North Carolina, and Texas. Section 97.307 Subpart A of the Commission's rules states, no amateur station transmission shall occupy more bandwidth than necessary for the information rate and emission type being transmitted, in accordance with good amateur practice. A commendation was issued to an operator in Illinois for his work with the local emergency management agency on the W9ANL repeater on 146.970 MHz, assisting in efforts to restore damaged power lines and remove downed trees. 2 operators in New Hampshire received commendations for building a system of 2-meter and 70-centimeter nodes across mountainous terrain in New Hampshire. Before their installation, all communications had to be relayed. A station in Illinois was issued an advisory for retransmitting communications from a repeater to 146.520 MHz without identification. An operator in Virginia was issued an advisory notice for transmissions on 3.933 MHz after being asked to cease interference on top of existing communications and continuing the interference with unsolicited comments. There was one FCC meeting during this period. The totals for monitoring were 1,550 hours on HF frequencies and 1,953 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,503 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
NASA's SpaceX Crew 11 arrived at the International Space Station in the early hours of Saturday, the 2nd of August, after a launch that suffered a one-day delay due to poor weather. Commander Zena Cardman, KJ5CMN, and pilot Mike Fink, KE5AIT, were accompanied by 2 mission specialists, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kamaya Yui and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Plotinov. During their 7-month tenure aboard the orbiting laboratory, the team will conduct experiments on the impact of microgravity on bacteria-killing viruses. They will also study plant cell division and human stem cells. The ISS assignment marks the first time in space for both Zena Cardman and Oleg Plotinov.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
On Wednesday, August 13th, the Copernic Observatory in Vestal, New York, will be running a high-altitude balloon camp for local high school students. The payload of the balloon will contain an automatic packet reporting system, or APRS transmitter, the call sign K2ZRO-9 for tracking, plus a slow-scan TV transmitter on 145.600 MHz throughout the flight, The launch is planned between 10 o'clock and 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 1400 to 1430 UTC. And the balloon should reach over 100,000 feet in elevation. In previous balloon flights, there's been APRS reports from Canada. The total flight time should be approximately 3 hours. Drew Dascour, KA1M, the director of the Copernic Observatory, is asking for volunteer amateur radio operators to track the flight on APS.FI and download the SSTV images if possible. We'd love to receive copies of images from stations in the Northeast and elsewhere so we can share with the students on how altitude matters on VHF, said Descour. Please send the images to K2ZRO at Copernic.org. For more information about the Copernic Observatory, visit Copernic Observatory and Science Center.
Calling its existing fee structure outdated, Pakistan's government has approved its first change to the fee structure for radio-based services in 25 years. More than 1,100 license holders, including amateur radio operators and private radio networks, are being affected by a fee hike. According to media reports, fees remained unchanged until now despite Pakistan's inflation rising by more than 700%. Pakistan's amateur license is initially issued for a 1-year period, but can be renewed for a 5-year period afterward. The fee is increasing from 450 rupees to 5,000 rupees, or in U.S. currency, from $1.60 to $18 for the term of the license. The change was approved in late July by the Economic Coordination Committee. The ECC acted after being told by the Pakistan Telecommunications Authority that fees no longer cover the expenses for managing licenses and overseeing use of the spectrum.
Although the 14th of August has been designated as Navajo Code Talkers Day, a group of proud amateur radio operators are taking several days to honor this special unit of brave Marines who served in the United States military during the Second World War. Few of these hams could be prouder than Herb Goodluck, November 7, Hotel Golf, whose late father, John V. Goodluck, had been one of the Marines who used their own Navajo language to craft a wartime code that could not be broken. Herb will be among those calling QRZ from the 10th to the 15th using the call sign November 7 Charlie. Operators will be using CW phone and FT8. Additional details, including operating frequencies, can be found on QRZ.com. The hams will be operating from Window Rock, Arizona, at the Navajo Tribal Park and Veterans Memorial.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJB. As of this Saturday, there will be 137 days left until Christmas. Time is really flying, so we better get started. Each week I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. On Friday, August 1st, the Tango Oscar 3 Kilo DXpedition team traveled to Mayotte Island via Paris and Nairobi, and they were QRV by the evening of August 2nd. They are using 3 IC7300s, 1 IC706, and 3 500-watt RM amplifiers. They also are trying dipole antennas, a 2-element 6-meter Yagi, and various bandpass filters for the 4 stations. Operations will cover 80 through 6 meters. Malaysia's Independence Day, or their National Day, is August 31st. This year marks the 68th anniversary, and a special event station, 9 Mike, 1957 Mike, will begin operations on August 1st and last until September 30th, with a special emphasis on August 30th and 31st. The stations will be located in West Malaysia, which is 9 Mike 2. Activity will be on sideband, CW, FT8, and the digital modes on 80 through 10 meters. And you can QSL that to 9 Mike 2 Radio Delta X-Ray. As a reminder, IK7WUL Antonio is undertaking another humanitarian mission in Africa, focusing on renovating orphanages and supporting community development in 4 countries. His travel schedule includes operating as 9 Uniform Zero DX in Burundi from August 2nd through the 10th, 9 X-Ray Zero DX in Rwanda from August 10th to the 18th, and later he'll be in Benin, which is TY2AA, Toga, 5 Victor Zero Delta X-Ray, and possibly Nigeria as 5 Nancy 4 Alpha Tango Mike between August 18th and September 7th. He plans to be active on 10 meters single sideband during his free time. And you can QSL that operation directly to Antonia, QSL via IK7WUL, and check QRZ.com regularly for updates. E51KEE is Steve, ZL2KE, operating from Rarotonga in the South Cook Islands, August 3rd to the 18th, on CW in some single sideband, on 40 through 10 meters. And you can QSL that operation directly to Steve, ZL2KE. Delta Mike 6 Mike Alpha, Michael, will be operating holiday style from various locations in Oscar Yankee, the Faroe Islands, from August 12th to the 20th under the call sign of Oscar Yankee stroke Delta Mike 6 Mike Alpha. He will operate single sideband and FT8, QSL via direct, the Bureau, LOTW, and QRZ.com. There's no dedicated website, but information can be found on his QRZ.com biography page, and again, that's Delta Mike 6 Mike Alpha. A radio team from Finland will be heading into the Åland Islands, Oscar Hotel Zero, from August 17th to the 24th, for a week-long de-expedition as Oscar Golf Zero Charlie. Their goal is to make between 30,000 and 50,000 QSOs. Operations will cover 160 meters up to 70 centimeters using CW, sideband, FT8, FT4, RIDI, MSK144, and JT65. The team also plans to attempt 50 MHz EME contacts for the first time. A European group is QRV from the Shetland Islands from August 4th to the 14th, including the WAE CW contest. Outside the contest, they will be operating as Mike stroke home calls. During the WAE, they will be using call signs GM4S. Activity will be on the HF bands and the QO100 satellite. As a reminder, Shetlands is a separate country in the DX Marathon and the Worked All Europes Award, but not in DXCC. QSOs will be uploaded to Clublog and LOTW, and QSLs for GM4S will be handled by Golf 3 Tango X-Ray Fox. Daya, Yankee India 1 Delta Zulu, is back in South Sudan using his Zulu 81 Delta call sign for about a month. He says he is very busy with other responsibilities though. It appears he will be on the air off and on, and you can QSL the Z81D to OM3JW. VP2V stroke KK4LWR and VP2V stroke KD8RTT are Andy and Tony, brothers, and they'll be operating from Tortola, British Virgin Islands, August 8th to the 11th, mainly single sideband and, quote, some CW and digital on 80 through 6 meters. They said they'll be focusing on 30, 17, and 12, but especially 6 meters, the MSK 144 mode, and the HamSci Meteor Scatter QSO party August 11th, one station on 6 and one on 10. For QSL, it's Logbook of the World or direct KD8RTT. And speaking of the British Virgin Islands and these brothers, this weekend the DX Mentor YouTube channel features 2 brothers who are going to the British Virgin Islands for their first DXpedition, and you just heard about that. It was really a fun episode to record, and they are really, really great ambassadors for the hobby and involved in all aspects. They're just a lot of fun. And I know you'll enjoy these guys as they prepare to depart in just a few weeks. If you are interested in DX podcasts and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be up to date on all DX activities. Until next week, this was Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Every single radio amateur has come to this hobby with an itch to scratch. Time and again I've seen amateurs around me pursue that particular purpose, only to come out the other end with a look of bewilderment writ large across their face. For some amateurs it means the end of their involvement in the hobby. For others it starts a new journey into the unknown. One of the ways we explore our community is by travelling out of our shack into the big outdoors in whatever form that takes. Popular activities include setting up a radio in a location and talking to others, known colloquially as an activation. We do this all over the planet. Perhaps the most recognisable of these is IOTA, or Islands on the Air, where a station is erected on an island and contacts are made. As amateurs, we cannot help ourselves and seem to have an insatiable need to measure our prowess. We do this by counting how many contacts, call signs, countries, grid squares, or in this case, islands, we've managed to put in the log. If an island represents a new call sign, a new country, and a new grid square, the contact making will turn into a feeding frenzy that can last for days, especially if the station offers multiple bands and modes, making the effort all the more tempting. We don't stop with islands. Summits, with Summits on the Air or SOTA, are popular, as are parks, POTA, and even over a weekend, the International Lighthouse and Light Ship Weekend, or ILLW. Some of these activations follow rules set out by amateurs like you and I, who thought it would be fun to track such activations and encourage others to participate. For example, IOTA World publishes a 4-page document outlining what's required for those on the island, activators, and those trying to make contact, or chasers. This raises an important point. Rules require documentation, which leads to discussion and disagreement, and versions. I can show you 2 versions of the IOTA World rules. Neither is dated, of course both are different, so if you're going to publish rules, make sure you add a date or version, preferably both, to the rules document. Disagreements aside, sometimes there are multiple programs with the same name or aims. 2 groups came up with the same idea and didn't know about each other, or a group in a different country wanted to run the show in a different way, and a new group was formed. I'm mentioning this because sometimes these groups are antagonistic towards each other and have forgotten that the whole point of this is to have fun. So what else can we activate? Well, there's castles and stately homes, bunkers, beaches, museums, Walmart parking lots, and even toilets on the air. Mind you, slow-scan television or SSTV is discouraged as a mode. The other day, the power was off for maintenance in my street and I planned on escaping to the local library, which caused me to search for libraries across Perth. It seems there's pretty much one in every suburb, and I considered the notion of activating a library or 3. Comes with easy access to public transport, a car park, and even toilet facilities. What's not to like? I wondered what might be a suitable exchange so it could incorporate the library itself, promoting amateur radio and libraries, 2 birds and all. I made a comment on mastodon.radio, and it turns out that Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, beat me to it several years ago. Libraries on the Air, or LIOTA. I've been hunting for a data set of libraries in Australia to give to Frank, but it's been slim pickings despite there being over 10,000 of them, apparently around 10% of those public. It raises another question. Is there a directory of activation types anywhere? I couldn't find one, so I started a list on my GitHub repository. Feel free to add any I missed. Toilet jokes aside, consider that TOTA is being held during the annual Hackers on Planet Earth conference, and it will introduce new people to our amateur community, which ultimately might be the best reason to have fun, get on air and make noise. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Registration for the IARU Region 2 22nd General Assembly is now open. The General Assembly will take place in Salvador, BA, Brazil, October 6th through the 9th, 2025. This assembly may also be referred to as Salvador 2025. La Liga de Amadores Brasileiros de Radio Emissão, o LABRE, will be the host society for the assembly. The assembly will be held at Hotel Villa Galé, Mares, Guarajuba, located on Rua da Alegria, Guarajuba, Camaçari, BA, Brazil. The General Assembly opening plenary session will begin at 0900 on Monday, October 6, 2025, and the General Assembly will conclude on Thursday, October 9, 2025, at 1300 hours. Upon registration for the General Assembly, all those registering will receive an email with instructions detailing the hotel registration process. After registering for the General Assembly, attendees should then make hotel reservations at the Villa Galé Guarajuba Hotel using the special discount code that will be provided in the email. International travelers from certain countries will need a visa to enter Brazil. For example, as of the date of this notice, travelers from the United States, Canada, and Australia will have to obtain a visa to enter Brazil. Citizens from most of the other South and Central American countries will not need a visa to enter Brazil. All international travelers should verify any visa requirement needed to enter Brazil. The Region 2 Secretary will evaluate any written contributions submitted to the General Assembly and will allocate to an appropriate committee the documents corresponding to each one. The President and Secretary of any committee that is constituted during the Assembly will have the responsibility to issue its final committee report by 0900 on Wednesday, October 8, 2025, to be presented for discussion and approval during the third and final plenary session on Thursday, October 9, 2025. Proposals approved by the Third Plenary Assembly will become the conference decisions and recommendations. Decisions are taken by absolute majority of the member societies present, including proxies. However, Region 2 bylaw changes require 2/3 majority, and changes to the Constitution requires a 3/4 majority. Each principal delegate will carry the vote of his or her society and may hold the representation by proxy of one absent society, subject to prior approval by the Credentials Committee of the corresponding authorization letter. A proxy form is available from the Region 2 Secretary at secretary@iaru-r2.org. The General Assembly will also elect the officers and directors to serve on the Region 2 Executive Committee for the period after the Assembly and until the next General Assembly in 2028. The host society for the 2028 Region 2 General Assembly will also be selected during Salvador 2025. The Region 2 Executive Committee and LABRE, as the host society, invites all Region 2 member societies to constitute a delegation to attend the General Assembly. The Region 2 Executive Committee and the host society anticipate a successful and enjoyable General Assembly.
The 2025 ARRL Alabama State Convention at the Huntsville Hamsfest is August 16th and 17th at the Von Braun Center in Huntsville. There's a full slate of activities happening around the event, and you can navigate them easier through the ARRL Events app. The app includes the event's full program, so you can browse and schedule forums, preview the extensive list of exhibitors, and find affiliated events. Those going are also encouraged to tap on the My Profile icon in the app to add their name and call sign, email address, and any additional information they would like to share with other guests. The My Badge icon displays a QR code of your event badge that can be scanned by another attendee or exhibitor using the Scan Badge icon, instantly connecting shared contact information with other hams at the event. The app is available for Apple and Android smart devices. You may also access the web browser version, which is optimized for nearly any browser or other type of mobile device. Tickets and information for the Huntsville Hamfest are available at www.hamfest.org.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
The FM transponder on AO123 has been activated on a periodic basis since its launch in late 2024. Beginning this weekend, it is expected to enter continuous service if no issues are observed. AO123, or ASTRU-1, is a 12U CubeSat mission designed by Russian and Chinese university students for education and amateur radio. The amateur radio station provides telecommand uplink and telemetry and digital image downlink. A new SDR-based transceiver was developed for ASRTU-1 to provide communication and experiment resources to radio amateurs, including a VU-FM transponder, a UHF telemetry downlink, and a 10.5G image downlink. The uplink is 145.850 MHz with a 67 Hz CTC SS tone, and the downlink is 435.400 MHz. Meanwhile, on July 29th, Johnny Kim installed the repaired HamTV module in the ISS's Columbus module, originally operational from mid-2015 until its failure in 2018. The repaired module was returned to the ISS earlier this year. Shortly after installation, reports of successful carrier reception were received from Europe. Carrier transmission is expected to continue for a few days. HamTV transmits live MPEG-2 video using a DVB-S signal on 2395 MHz, primarily for educational contacts.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has announced the decommissioning of NOAA 15 and NOAA 19. NOAA 15 will be decommissioned on August 12, 2025, and NOAA 19 will be decommissioned on August 19, 2025. These two remaining satellites in the NOAA Polar Operational Environmental Satellites constellation are far beyond their primary mission design life. All have incurred subsystem and instrument degradation or failures and have entered a twilight phase where failure modes are increasingly likely. NOAA has completed end-of-life testing activities for NOAA 15 and NOAA 19 and will commence the decommission process shortly. NOAA 18 had previously been decommissioned on June 6, 2025 at 1740 UTC. Many amateur satellite enthusiasts have copied the APT weather data from NOAA's Polar Operational Environmental Satellites over the years. With a strong signal at 137 MHz, these satellites have served as a gateway to satellite reception. The decommissioning of these satellites represents an end of an era.
A reminder that Ham SCI, Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, is preparing for a new series of meteor scatter experiments and needs amateur radio operators to help. The first of two events will take place August 11th through the 12th from 0000 to 2400 UTC. That's for 48 hours during the Perseids meteor shower. This is a combination special event and a contest to generate contact data during meteor scatter events using 10 and 6 meters. To be successful, this event needs operators, both active and passive. Operators are needed to be active calling CQ on MSK 144 or passive, if possible, reporting via PSK reporter as monitors. The best times are early morning hours prior to 10 meters opening to F2 propagation. Meteor scatter propagation occurs well below F2 and is supported in or near the E layer where meteor ionization tracks occur. Saturday mornings are being used regularly to announce and coordinate 10-meter contacts during Ping Jockey Central. Announcements are also being made on the Front Range 6metergroups.io due to the substantial number of meteor scatter operators in that group. Operators are needed to help increase numbers during early morning hours. Eventually, the Ham Sky team will be collecting operator contact information, but for now, all that's required is for participants to report through PSK Reporter. For more information on the operating guidelines for the activity, please visit Meteor Scatter QSO Party Guidelines at the Ham Sky website. The next Ham Sky Meteor Scatter QSO party will be December 12th and 13th, 2025, during the Geminids Meteor Shower.
A petition submitted to the Federal Communications Commission proposes sweeping changes to reallocate underused VHF low-band radio frequencies for the General Mobile Radio Service and Family Radio Service. National Capital Communications, LLC, also known as Mid-Atlantic REACT in the Washington, D.C. area, has formally requested that the FCC reallocate a series of outdated or abandoned frequencies in the 30 through 50 megahertz band to enhance GMRS and FRS capabilities. We will bring you further details on this story as they become available.
Radio Amateurs of Canada are proud to announce the development of the Auxiliary Communications Service in Ontario, alongside a comprehensive new recruitment and retention plan. This initiative is part of the Ontario government's $10 million investment in emergency preparedness grants, aimed at enhancing the response capability of Ontario Corps partners across the province. Radio Amateurs of Canada is receiving $545,000 to recruit and retain volunteers, upgrade skills, and prepare teams for a deployment within Ontario. These efforts will ensure a sustainable volunteer workforce equipped with necessary skills for emergency telecommunication. The Auxiliary Communications Service will play a crucial role in providing reliable communications during emergencies, leveraging the expertise of skilled professionals and highly trained volunteers. This service will be instrumental in supporting local emergency responders and ensuring communities are better prepared to respond to local emergencies.
An unprecedented joint satellite project between the Indian Space Research Organization and NASA is giving researchers the hope of better studying the Earth's climate and helping improve responses to natural disasters by monitoring the most subtle changes on Earth, including in its glaciers and wetlands. The satellite is known as NISAR, the NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar Mission. Its launch aboard an ISRO spacecraft on the 30th of July from the Satish Dhawan Space Center sent it on its mission to send microwaves to collect data from different surfaces on the planet. When processed, the data will be visible in an exceptionally high resolution. An estimated 80 terabytes of data will be collected daily. Scientists have said that the method has unprecedented accuracy. Researchers and governments around the world will be able to view the data via a cloud platform where they will have open access. The project is being praised as the first collaborative satellite mission of its kind between the Indian and U.S. space agencies.
The 28th International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend will take place August 16 at 0001 UTC until August 17 at 2400 UTC. Started in 1993 by Air Amateur Radio Group in Scotland as the Northern Lighthouse Activity Weekend, now coincides with many countries, honoring the lighthouses each August. The event is not a contest and participation is free. Each station's operators decide on which bands and nodes they'll operate, and there's no restrictions on antennas or power, and each station must be operated in compliance with your operator's license. Amateur radio operators are encouraged to enjoy the event and make as many contacts as possible. In the United States, Fire Island Lighthouse W2GSB in Babylon, New York, and the Eagle Harbor Lighthouse K8L in Eagle Harbor, Michigan, will be operating special event stations. Complete information, including registration guidelines and a current list of participants, can be found at International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend.
Keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio. Available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
Welcome to the 40th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, Ham's organizations, events, inventions. This is part 2 of the 40th segment. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Thanks to Chris Cadella for letting us use his website in the production of these segments. Now, put your feet up in that hassock again, and here we go with Crossings for The Reply, Part 2. As December arrived, amateurs were ready and hoping for a big success in the third set of transatlantic tests, barring perfectly rotten weather, wrote Warner. It would again be essential for participants to operate in a coordinated fashion. Everyone should get on during the transmitting periods and stick to the schedule, remembering that even low-power stations, those using 5 or 10 watts, were heard in Europe last time. The receiving task was even more important for North Americans. It would be the history-making event this time. We must copy them, fellows. Copy them and open the door to regular two-way transoceanic work, or get the grand raspberry from all the world, he warned. Amateurs had the right equipment and operator ability, so the single most important thing to work towards would be cooperation to make the amateur air in North America absolutely quiet during the final 10 days of the test when Europe would be transmitting. North American hams must repay their European colleagues' efforts the previous year to help achieve new records. Let it not be said of us, oh, it must not, that we failed to copy Europe because our men wouldn't play the game and refused to keep quiet air, pleaded Warner. Early indications of success began to appear before the tests even began. During the preliminary qualifying session, 91 calls were heard in Europe. Using a receiver with a multi-stage RF amplifier, detector, and one-stage audio amplifier, the Manchester Wireless Society, operating at their club station 5MS at Baguilly, sent their list to Schnell. In France, Deloy at 8AB copied one ARY CW signal on 10 December, and at the Burndep Company station in London, J.H.D. Ridley copied 9 U.S. amateur stations that same day, along with the morning broadcast from WJZ. The signals were booming in, sometimes audible 12 feet from the phones. British 2KW wrote Schnell that, being short of paper, they used the cover of a QST issue to record the call signs as they were heard. He enclosed it in his letter as a souvenir. The tests were indeed a success. Warner's exuberant February 1923 QST write-up, The Transatlantic Triumph, was nearly 14 pages long. This poor magazine has recorded so many dazzling accomplishments in recent issues that its supply of exclamation points and bold-faced type is in danger of exhaustion, he gushed. Time after time, the weeks just past, we amateurs have achieved big victories in undertakings, accomplishments which has made us throw our hat at the stenographer, crown the office boy with a wastebasket, and dance a merry jig. In Europe, 315 individual stations from the U.S. and Canada were heard, 161 in Britain and 239 in France and Switzerland. 85 were heard both in Britain and on the continent. All were using CW. Not a single Spark station was heard. Though successful in the reverse direction, only 20 American amateurs heard signals from Europe, mostly French 8AB and British 5WS and 2FZ. Godley must have been greatly disappointed, having predicted 250 in December. Undoubtedly, hearing signals during the preliminaries had excited more listeners in Europe than in the U.S. and Canada. QST technical editor Robert S. Cruz noted that even the YLs got into the tests and showed a photograph of everyone's favorite YL, Marion Adair Garmhausen, 3 BCK, in her working clothes, getting an antenna in shape for the operation. It seems, however, that her efforts went unrewarded since her call sign did not appear in any of the lists, although 3HG, the photographer's call sign, did. Complete lists of calls heard were printed for each night of the test, organized according to time period, free period, and codes verified for the qualified transmitters, plus a section labeled Working DX for calls heard outside of the test period or in QSO. The number of stations listed increased each night. While this could not have been due to improving conditions, it's more likely that as word spread of easily copied signals, more listeners and possibly more transmitting stations in the free-for-all sessions were attracted to participate. In Britain, stations from every North American call district were copied, the most from districts 1, 2, 3, and 8, with 3ZW the most reported station. Notable among the 4th district was 4OI in Puerto Rico. Western New York station 8AQO was heard nearly everywhere on every night. Its impressive station equipment and T antenna were reminiscent of 1BCG's the previous year. Among the other stations copied in Britain and in France or Switzerland were 1ZE Vermilion and 1BCG. No stations copied both in Britain and in France or Switzerland were 1ZE Vermilion and 1BCG. No information had yet been received about the number of listeners in Britain, but Kurtz reported that at the end of the tests there had been 40 listeners in France and 2 in Switzerland. Their daily report simply listed calls heard by someone without identifying the listeners. Although the number of reported North American calls heard in France exceeded those heard in Britain, the accuracy in copying call signs and codes correctly was somewhat lower. Besides the amateurs, many calls were heard by American ship operators who also listened in. Corsi reported that 17 British stations had been assigned transmitting slots and code groups, and Kurtz listed 22 in France. There were 30-minute free-for-all transmit periods in Britain, and it was unknown whether or not there were such sessions in France. But the results of the westbound test were comparatively dismal, a factor of 10 lower than Godley's expectation. It was not initially clear what was the cause: poor conditions, transmitters, receivers. Eventually, lack of cooperation on the North American side would be blamed. Nevertheless, the European amateurs were heard in North America for the first time. Cruz speculated that one reason for the disparity between eastward and westward reception reports was that, having very restricted transmitting privileges, Europeans had concentrated on improving techniques more than Americans had, particularly working with tuned RF amplifiers, a new technology. And since there were far fewer transmitting stations in Europe, it was much easier to get cooperation in obtaining silence on the air there. At times, the QRM on the American side was merciless, complained Warner. On the first night of listening, many operators were still transmitting due to their confusion over the use of GMT in the schedule. The next couple of nights were more or less consumed in quieting things down. As Cruz put it, it is an awful job in a country having 16,000 licensed transmitters, about 60% of which are thought to be in commission at any one time and representing amateurs of many diverse interests. After things quieted down, it was possible to listen for many minutes on 200 meters and meet only the silence of the grave. Surely the only time this has been the case since macaroni was invented, wrote Cruz, which must have caused every reader in 1923 to do a double take. But even in the relatively quiet periods, when the major stations were off the air, there were quite a few others completely ignoring the tests, able to work halfway across the country with their little sets and hugely enjoying the clear, uninterrupted signals, telling each other what fine business it was. Clearly annoyed, Cruz continued that it was the punks and lids who were at it, the halting fists that could hardly be read, the poor sets which had never been heard out of their backyards before, and blessed if they weren't getting out all over the country during this quiet spell and enjoying it hugely. Some of them even complaining bitterly of QRM. The League received hundreds of letters complaining about the QRM during the U.S. receiving portion of the tests. Some sent in logs of copied call signs suggesting that a blacklist be published. It would not happen, though, since the League recognized it really had no authority to demand silence during the tests. And besides, not all U.S. amateurs were ARRL members. Of course, it's perfectly true that the bulk of the racket was made by our own gang, and for such of these as profess to be loyal, enthusiastic members, we have a grave sympathy, admitted Warner, adding, "We have a sweet little list of them up at headquarters." We will continue next week with more of Crossings 4, The Reply. Included in this material are quotes from the following: Kenneth B. Warner, All Set, editorial, QST, December 1922, page 41, In Which We Get Across, QST, January 1923, page 9, Kenneth B. Warner, The Transatlantic Triumph, QST, February 1923, page 7, Kenneth B. Warner, Does This Shoe Fit You? Editorial QSD, February 1923, page 41. With thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. In the preparation of this chapter, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. AMSAT VP of Engineering Jerry Buxton, N0JY, received a letter from NASA announcing changes to the CubeSat Launch Initiative, or CSLI program. Basically, due to the President's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget, there will be a reduction and realignment of personnel. Thus, NASA has fewer resources to maintain the program. This will affect AMSAT satellite project launches, as neither Golf T nor Golf 1 were ever manifested to a launch. Golf T should still be completed on schedule and will be launched with the resources on hand. The Fox Plus satellites will continue to follow their construction and launch timetable. They were never considered to be a part of the CSLI program. Although this is an unfortunate situation, AMSAT Board of Directors is working with AMSAT Engineering to provide other launch options at their annual board meeting in October in Phoenix, Arizona. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly solar weather and propagation forecast report. Solar activity was at low levels from July 28 through the first part of August. We experienced moderate levels on August 3rd. The largest flare of the period was an M2.9 event observed from region 4168 on August 3rd. The region also produced numerous C-class events. Numerous C-class activity was observed from regions 4153, 4155, and 4167. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejection activity was observed. No proton events were observed at geosynchronous orbit. Geomagnetic field activity was at quiet to unsettled levels the entire highlight period. A single active period was observed late on August 3rd. A majority of the unsettled periods was due to weak negative polarity coronal hole high speed stream influence. Solar wind speeds were at mostly 400 km per second from July 28 through midday on July 30th, and 475 to 500 km per second from midday July 30th through August 3rd, with a peak velocity observed at 600 km per second late on August 3rd. Solar activity is expected to be at mostly low levels with a chance for M-class flares for the outlook period. Geomagnetic field activity is expected to be at active to G-storm levels on August 11th through August 22nd, and from the 25th through August 30th due to recurrent coronal hole high-speed stream influence effects. Quiet to unsettled levels are expected on the remaining days of the outlook period. Overall solar activity has not changed much in recent days, but it has been higher than on the same days of the previous solar cycle. However, eruption activity increased in the northwestern part of the solar disk. The M4.4 eruption back on August 5th, with a maximum at 1553 UTC, was of greatest significance for further development as it was accompanied by a coronal mass ejection, part of which is heading toward Earth. It is expected to arrive on August 8th, at the same time as a co-rotating interactive region, should cause an intensification of the solar wind blowing from a large coronal hole in the southern hemisphere of the Sun. The combination of these two phenomena will cause an increase in geomagnetic activity during the period. Thanks to the intensified solar wind, the geomagnetic field will remain active. On the first day, there will likely be a positive phase of development, accompanied by an increase in the highest usable frequencies of the F2 ionospheric region, while on the second day, the development will transition to a negative phase, with a decrease in usable frequencies and an overall deterioration in shortwave propagation conditions due to increased attenuation. After that, rather turbulent developments can be expected until approximately August 12, followed by a calming down from August 13th. Overall solar activity should remain only slightly elevated. Looking now at the 10.7 centimeter flux, on August 8th through the 10th, it will be at 135, on August 11th through the 13th, it will drop to 130, and August 14th and 15th it will hover around 135. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in Radio Sport, August 9th and the 10th, the WAEDX contest, that's CW, and the Maryland DC QSO party, CW and phone. On August 9th, the 50 megahertz fall sprint, CW phone and digital. August 10th, the SARL HF digital contest, digital of course. August 13th, the NAQCC CW sprint, that's CW. August 16th and 17th, the SARTG WW RIDI contest, that is digital. And August 16th and 17th as well, the ARRL EME contest, 2.3 gigahertz and up, CW phone and digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions. August 9th, the ARRL Idaho State Convention. That's in Post Falls, Idaho. August 16th and 17th, the Huntsville Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Alabama State Convention. That's in Huntsville, Alabama. August 21st through the 24th, the Northeast Ham Exposition, hosting the ARRL New England Division Convention. That's in Marlborough, Massachusetts. And August 30th through September 1st, the Shelby Hamfest, hosting the ARRL North Carolina Section Convention in Shelby, North Carolina.
The ARRL Teachers Institute of Wireless Technology celebrates the generosity of Jeff Goldman, K3DUA. A gift from Goldman has underwritten an entire week of the program, allowing 13 educators from all over the United States to attend the program. With a close-up look at K3DUA, we go to league headquarters where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this report.
Goldman took an interest in radio at the age of 12 when his father bought him a shortwave receiver. Hearing signals from around the world captivated his mind. The most interesting thing I got to listen to was Sputnik back in the days when it went up in the early 1950s, he said. In 1958, Goldman earned his novice license and began a journey in amateur radio that he still enjoys today. The 13 teachers who attended the Jeffrey B. Goldman K3DUA Teachers Institute will take what they've learned back into their classrooms and incorporate hands-on approaches to radio and wireless technology into their STEM lessons. ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beald, K8EAL, admires Goldman's leadership gift. By making this gift now, Jeff is setting the example for others to follow, and we are excited to recognize his generosity by naming this week in his honor. Goldman and his wife Janice visited the teachers on Tuesday. Several of the teachers were excited to share what their attendance meant to them. Goldman is thrilled at the number of young people who will be impacted by his gift and the ripple effects it may have on amateur radio and electrical engineering. He'll tell the students that they have a bright future in amateur radio, and it's a good hobby, he said. It can provide you an education. It can provide you a lifetime of earning if you have an engineering degree, and you get to go into technology. It can lead computers or hardware or design whatever. Technology is a good field. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Early in life, his radio hobby started shaping his career. I got into engineering school as a result of my interest in electronics, he said. When I was drafted back in the late 60s, I went to the recruiter and asked, "What can you do to keep me from having to dig foxholes in Vietnam?" recounted Goldman. His skills formed as a ham radio operator got him into the Army Signal Corps and a duty assignment in Germany. I got into a very specialized unit, he said. Goldman would go on to start an amateur radio-related small business in the 1970s. Now, he's hoping to use the success he found as a result of wireless technology to pave the way for future generations to follow in his footsteps. Because of the wonderfulness that ham radio has done for me and my whole life, I've been very successful, and I think it's an important hobby. It's an important national asset for the country, he said. You can learn more about the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology at www.arrl.org/TI.
The Pomeranian local branch of the Polish Amateur Radio Union, PZK, in Gdansk will celebrate the anniversaries of 3 Polish lighthouses August 9th through the 17th, 2025. There will be special event stations operating at each lighthouse. Certificates will be available for each location, and contacts can be made on bands 160 through 6 meters, plus WARC bands 30, 17, and 12 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and satellite. Applications for the awards will be accepted only electronically through the organizer's online platform until December 31st, 2025. Paper QSL cards for confirming contacts with the special event stations in a limited edition of 1,000 pieces will be sent to the first 1,000 correspondents who served by the QSL Bureau. The remaining correspondents will receive e-QSL cards. For more information, visit the Polish Amateur Radio Union website.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Amateur radio enthusiasts have developed a method to access critical hurricane monitoring data following a decision by the United States government to end online distribution. The data originates from the Special Sensor Microwave Imager Sounder aboard the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program, long used by meteorologists to monitor storm development. In June, the Department of Defense announced it would discontinue public access to real-time Special Sensor Microwave Imager data, citing cybersecurity concern. Although the cutoff was postponed until August, forecasters warned that losing this source of microwave imagery would hinder their ability to analyze tropical cyclone structures. In response, amateur radio enthusiasts developed a workaround led by SatDump Project's creator. The SatDump software project has released a new decoder that allows users to receive these transmissions directly from the satellite. Although official distribution is scheduled to stop soon, the satellite continues to broadcast unencrypted signals over the United States and polar regions. With the right radio hardware, details which are available online, users can interpret the satellite signal independently. The decoder software was built using a combination of reverse engineering and publicly available documentation to replicate some of the functionality NOAA had previously provided. Not all data channels are accessible using this method. Thermal data in particular remains unavailable due to the absence of reference materials needed for decoding. Still, the tool provides valuable insight for those monitoring storms during hurricane season. The decoder is still under active development and is available in the Verity branch of the SatDump GitHub repository. Interested users can download the tool and find setup instructions and ongoing updates through the project page.
Former ARRL Southeastern Division Director Frank Butler, Whiskey 4 Romeo Hotel, has become a silent key. He passed away at the age of 100. Butler was an ARRL member for at least 78 years. He served 29 years as the ARRL Southeastern Division Director until his retirement from 50 years of service as an elected official of ARRL in 2007. He began his elected service as the Western Florida Section Communications Manager in 1957. At the second meeting of the ARRL Board of Directors in July 2007, Butler was recognized for his generous donation to the newly dedicated Diamond Terrace at ARRL headquarters. The Diamond Terrace includes inscribed bricks as memorials and honors donated by hundreds of radio amateurs and clubs. Butler's donation honors his family and mentors. Butler was an ARRL life member and a member of the ARRL Maxim Society of the Benefactor class. He was in the A1 Operators Club. Butler remained active in ARRL events, particularly in the southeastern United States, even after his time on the board. He volunteered in the ARRL exhibit at the 2024 Orlando Hamcation. Social media was filled with posts from hams remembering Butler, including a group photo from the Playground Amateur Club on Instagram. ARRL President Rick Roderick, Kilo 5, Uniform Romeo, described Butler as a gracious man. I never heard him raise his voice nor say a bad word to anyone. I served with Frank on various committees and assignments over the years where his leadership and steady guidance was valued by all, said Roderick.
In response to recent service changes and anticipated shutdown affecting Ham Shack hotline users, Hams Over IP Incorporated is extending a warm invitation to all amateur radio operators affected by the transition to apply for service on the Hams Over IP network. As a volunteer-driven non-profit platform, Hams Over IP was founded by Hams for Hams, with a mission to offer a reliable, secure, and modern VoIP network, exclusively for licensed amateur radio operators worldwide. With robust infrastructure, active development, and a welcoming community, Hams Over IP is proud to support the continued growth of digital amateur communications. As Ham Shack hotline services wind down for many, Hams Over IP stands ready to welcome operators who want to continue enjoying seamless radio over IP connections. Hams Over IP offers reliable service and infrastructure, active peer and extensive network, secure registration with call sign verification, wide device capability including Cisco, Grandstream, Softphone, and more. And of course, friendly technical support and community forums. Interested hams can apply for service on the web at www.hamsoverip.com. The application process is simple and designed to verify call signs' validity while providing setup guidance for a smooth onboarding experience. Hams Over IP Inc. is a nonprofit organization committed to supporting and expanding amateur radio VoIP technologies. Built by licensed amateur operators, HoIP maintains a secure and dynamic network that connects hams through modern IP-based voice services with servers powered by Vultra, located in multiple countries that are designed to provide low latency and optimized performance for users worldwide.
ARRL was well represented at the 2025 Maine State Convention in Augusta, Maine on August 2, 2025. ARRL New England Division Vice Director Phil Temple's K9HI reports the convention, sponsored by the Androscoggin ARC, featured a robust indoor flea market along with presentations covering Parks on the Air, an ARES meet and greet, QCWA chapter meeting, UFB New England, and an ARRL forum featuring New England Division Director Tom Freeney, K1KI, and Maine Section Manager Phil Dugan, N1EP.
The United States Coast Guard's 235th birthday will be celebrated on August 9, 2025. Special Event Station NI-6IW will be in operation on board the USS Midway Museum ship from 1600 Zulu to 2300 Zulu on 14.320 kHz single sideband, on 7.250 kHz on single sideband, 14.070 on PSK31, and D-Star using the pop-out system repeaters. A QSL card will be available. The U.S. Coast Guard was founded on August 4, 1790, when Congress authorized construction of 10 vessels to enforce tariff and trade laws, prevent smuggling, and protect the collection of federal revenue. The White House issued a special presidential message on August 4, 2025, saying, "As we commemorate the 235th birthday of the United States Coast Guard, we honor the brave patriots who defend our shores, and we remain eternally indebted to their unwavering dedication to preserving American excellence."
The 28th International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend will take place August 16th from 0001 UTC to August 17th at 2400 UTC 2025. Started in 1993 by the Ayr Amateur Radio Group in Scotland, that's AYR, as the Northern Lighthouse Activity Weekend. International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend now coincides with many countries honoring lighthouses each August. The event is not a contest, and participation, of course, is free. Each station's operators decide on which bands and modes they will operate. There are no restrictions on antennas or power, and each station must be operated in compliance with the operator's license class. Amateur radio operators are encouraged to enjoy the event and make as many contacts as possible. In the United States, Fire Island Lighthouse, W2GSB, Babylon, New York, and the Eagle Harbor Lighthouse, K8L, Eagle Harbor, Michigan, will be operating special event stations. Complete information, including registration guidelines and a current list of participants, can be found at International Lighthouse Lightship Weekend on the web.
Leave it to ham radio operators to know how destructive and even fatal a lightning strike can be. That's why a number of years ago, educators at a school in rural West Bengal, India, sought input from local hams for a project by physics students to help protect farmers when they are caught in the fields during storms and lightning strikes. According to reports in the Times of India, the homebrew, affordably built device, which resembles a bicycle wheel, has been evaluated by the Central Power Research Institute. It also received recognition in 2020 at the National Children's Science Congress, a national showcase for innovative technology devised by youngsters between the ages of 10 and 17. This Week in Amateur Radio previously discussed this simple device in its first report on the project last November, noting that it affixes a wheel-like component to the top of a high bamboo pole. An electrical wire connects it to metal in the earth to provide a path to ground. The secretary of the West Bengal Radio Club said in media reports that 40 such devices have already been put in place at 40 locations throughout northern Bengal, where the fields for the farmers and their animals are moist and marshy. Now the waiting begins. The Times of India reported that the patent application for the project was filed on the 27th of July.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Former longtime ARRL Central Division Director George Dick Isley, W9GIG, has become a silent key. He passed away on July 26 at the age of 86. Isley served on the board of directors of ARRL from 2001 to 2016, when he was named an ARRL honorary vice president upon his retirement. He was an ARRL and AMSAT life member and a member of the ARRL Maxim Society at the ambassador level. According to a 2016 story, when he retired from the board, Isley served as a member of the executive committee, as well as on the board's administration and finance and membership service committee. He chaired the CEO search committee after the former ARRL CEO David Sumner, K1ZZ, announced his retirement in 2015. Isley also served as the foundation vice president from 2008 through 2016, and while on board he was involved in legislative affairs. He also volunteered as incoming QSL Bureau card sorter. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, worked with Isley on many projects over the years. He was always a hard and dedicated volunteer for the League, including as a donor. His leadership was valuable in helping us in many ways, he said, serving as his division, the League, and amateur radio in an outstanding manner. Isley is a graduate of the University of Missouri and a retired U.S. Navy and American Airlines pilot. Isley served to help organize the National Frequency Coordinators Council and served 4 years as a director.
And finally this week, how are your decoding skills? An upcoming special event will help you find out. The Enigma machine that the Germans used during World War II to create encoded secret messages is about to be put back into action. KPH, the maritime radio station in California, will be transmitting messages using Enigma encryption for broadcast via both CW and RTTY. Listeners copy the message and then, using an actual Enigma machine they may have in their shack, or a simulated one available online, work to decrypt the message, which will be sent in groups of 5 letters each. This actual tradition recalls the hard work of World War II-era cryptographers who ultimately cracked the code. Certificates are awarded for proof of successful decode, first to decode, and for use of original or replica hardware. The broadcast begins at 2000 UTC on the 30th of August on all KPH, CW, and RTTY frequencies.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters around the country and around the world on great repeater systems like WA3PBD repeater system, on Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. on 146.730 and 223.940, covering all of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.